So welcome to the first session, Recreating the Medieval. First, everyone is there? Yeah, that's nice. Hello in Zoom also. So first, I would like to introduce our experts, because we have a lot of video presentations, I would like to ask you, and also you in Zoom, just to really short, do a briefly repeat of what you presented there after I introduce you, so that everybody remembers and gets a rough idea of what we want to talk about. So online here today we have Julian and Ralf Mahytka from Höxter. Julian studied environmental engineering at the Technical University of Darmstadt and the University of Bremen, and works for the company Nussek in Beverungen as a project manager and a process engineer for dismantling nuclear plants. Belongs absolutely to Middle Ages, right? Really interesting. Ralf Mahytka studied archaeology. Oh my God! Has worked on excavations in Egypt and Taiwan. Has participated in various exhibitions in museums in Paderborn, and works as a city archaeologist for the city of Höxter. Both have worked together on an augmented reality, so they bring back to life the sunken city of Corvey, so they called Pompeii Obesa. Then we have here and present Mareike Antepoth and Erik Beck from Paderborn in Rio. So both work in the Kreismuseum Wewelsburg. Mareike is currently studying history and art history at the Ruhr-Universität. Did a voluntary social year at the Kreismuseum Wewelsburg and worked as a freelance educational assistant at the Memorial and Remembrance Site. Works as a scientific project manager of the project Digital Wewelsburg at the Kreismuseum Wewelsburg since 2022. Erik, also from the Wewelsburg, studied history, book studies and art at Johannes Gutenberg University in Mainz and at the University of Glasgow. He did his PhD on medieval perception and use of ancient and early historical remains and landscape of Upper Rhine with special references to the castles. At the Albert Ludwig University in Freiburg. He worked as a research assistant at the Technical University Dortmund and the University of Cologne, and completed his traineeship at Wewelsburg Castle, where he is still employed as a curator. And the third in our group is Silke Schwandt from Bielefeld. She studied history, classical philology and Protestant theology at the University of Bielefeld. Afterwards, she was involved in project dealings with literature and language in the Middle Ages. Did her PhD with magna cum laude on the Virtus concept at the Goethe University in Frankfurt, then worked there with a focus on digital humanities. In 2030, she became an academic counselor of the University of Bielefeld at the Faculty of History, Philosophy and Theology, and has been a professor of digital history since 2020. So, what a great coincidence that you all came, I think, from the same region. Maybe we start with one from Zoom, maybe Julian and Ralf, maybe you can give us a little repetition of your project, what you presented there.
So I think now we are unmuted.
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can use the right. So, thank you very much. And this year we had the established 10 days ago. And one part of the show is archaeological park. And the topic of the deserted city of Kauai. And we want to show a lot of and get touch to the medieval times of the city of the 13th century. But the problem is you see nothing.
Ralf, sorry to interrupt you. Maybe you can speak a little bit louder.
Or nearer to the microphone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that possible?
I try my best. A little bit lower. So the problem is you cannot see anything or nearly anything from the city Kauai, only part of the fortification, for example. If you know where, you can see it, but not many people know where. So we are thinking about how to show the city. And we have some ideas maybe to make some audio devices, and we have some foundations on the ground. And in the last step, we could take contact to NUSEC, and we are thinking about to make the virtual reconstruction of some houses. Altogether, we have 5 points we can show. It's a medieval house from the 13th century. We have the fortification, a bridge over the River Weser. What's next? The main street. And the last one is the church, was extra built for the city. And the basement of all the basics is archaeological proofs and excavations in the 80s and 90s, last century, and some written sources. And by this, we could have actually a really good, and the next one, you could see it in the movie, is some geophysical researches. For example, the ground radar, and this is a nice example how to recreate the church digital with co-working with the NUSEC GmbH. Maybe you can.
Yes, for us it was quite important to get as most and as detailed data we can obtain to reproduce the church. As example, with the ground radar, we were able to take exact, more precise measurements, and also to align the AR model on a correct way, so the dimensions are correct, and also the directions and where was the towers and how wide everything was obtained all of this, and also how the interior maybe have been built, so we can see the columns, the thickness of the columns, and by that we could also, it was possible to derive how tall everything was. Yeah.
And so step by step, we could offer the visitors of the Landesgartenschau, but in the future too, the archaeological park will go on. And you can see it, I hope, a lot of years. And we will, I think we can make the offerings also bigger, so you can access them for make a bigger offer add-ons to the digital things you can see.
We also use 3D printing technology in our project. Or you can see here, this is a 3D printed recreation of a house. We took a landscape reconstruction from a nearby deserted city as a model for this. It's printed with a biopolymer and wooden particles inside, so we were able to recreate a pretty nice texture and structure of this. And the next step was to recreate an image recognition algorithm. So it's actually now possible that the young, we call them the young archaeologists at the Landesgartenschau, can excavate some objects we 3D printed and can scan them with their mobile devices, and they will tell you exactly where this object came from and some historical facts about the object. And it's built like a collective album, collective book. So there's some sort of gamification also inside there.
Yeah, that's really great. I could watch the people use it, and it's not only for the young, even old people or older people. It's everything altogether. We reach, I think, nearly all ages. And for the collecting book, it's really great. That's objects you can find from the real objects you could find in this area. So it's a real digital copy of an object you found at the excavation in the 80s, for example, like a key or ceramics, shirts, horseshoes, and some others. So you can excavate it in this sandbox. You can touch it. Okay, it's not the same feeling like the original, but the size and so on is the same. And then you can scan it, and you can get the complete information about what you could find, what you have found, and what is it, and where you can find it. So and the context to the city, Corvine.
Yeah, I think we resumed what we've been doing at Corvine.
Thank you very much. Yeah, maybe we can get a repeat from you, Mareike and Erik, about your project.
Yeah, so the project Digitale Wewelsburg is quite a huge project, and one aspect of it is actually the medieval model we presented to you in our video club. So we decided that we wanted to take a close look to Wewelsburg Castle. I don't know if any one of you have been there. We showed a picture of the modern castle, so it's triangular shaped right now. You can't really see the medieval part, and that was our actual idea, to present this medieval castle and to show that. Because we had an exhibition which was curated by Erik this year. We had the opportunity to combine this and get so much more information because we have a company, F7 Digital, who digitalize the whole building. So we have a building information model. For new buildings, it's quite standard. For our castle, it's quite unique. And so it was very interesting. We found many new facts, many new rooms, many little stuff we didn't know before. It was very interesting. And they took thousands of laser scans and photos with a drone, with a small hand camera to get this model. And so one output of this model is our medieval model, which was the scientific part was most part of Erik and of Daniel, who can't be here because he's working in Dresden actually right now.
Yeah, we already had an analog model in our museum, and as we had the opportunity to get it in the virtual and digital room surrounding, we grabbed this opportunity and tried to get all the younger stuff like Renaissance architecture of the castle away, and only focus on the medieval structures we already knew, and the medieval structures we got to know by the new techniques we could use, and that's I guess the new thing about our model in Wewelsburg now, that we could focus on the medieval stuff and could also focus on all the things we don't know of the castle, because we have a lot of structures which were not excavated by archaeologists. We had a lot of details of buildings, like the height of the tower, for example. We can't really tell, and so we decided on a model which is a little bit in between next to life model and and a hypothetical model based on archaeological and historical evidence.
Thank you. Silke, please make the last short repeat of your project.
Yeah, thank you very much. Also, thank you for being so flexible so that I can join virtually. I really wanted to be there with you, but then I caught a bug, so I need to stay home. But I'm really happy to be part of this crowd and be able to still discuss the project. So our project takes a little bit of different approach to reconstructing or representing stuff in VR. We are not reconstructing buildings or sceneries or sort of immersive scenarios in that sort of very, I don't know, realistic maybe way. But what we wanted to do is to address the way that we think about history and how we sort of connect different knowledge that we have about events and people and places that eventually make up what we know about historical events. So we designed a virtual reality application where you can basically interact with knowledge graphs. The information for these knowledge graphs we took from two different sources. So first of all, we started with a very small data set taken from the Synchronoptical World Atlas of Arno Peters. That was a work where he tried to synchronize world history, basically, and collected lots of information about different regions of the world, and then sort of created this knowledge about people, places, and events. We took that and sort of transferred it into our own small ontology to be able to represent it as a knowledge graph. And now you can sort of step inside the knowledge graph and interact with all the nodes that you can see. So you can get more information about the knowledge. You can sort of evaluate the distances within the knowledge graph from where you stand. So if you stand on a certain event or node for a person, the others will be represented according to distance in time or space, or semantical distance. So similar events or similar, I don't know, something that belongs to the same kind of narrative. And then you can sort of always expand the network, make it smaller, also sort of save your last journey through our virtual space of knowledge, so that you can sort of document the way that you constructed your own narratives. And what we wanted to do is to basically use the interactive qualities and immersive qualities of virtual reality to use abstract data and make it more of a possible experience. So it's a little bit a different approach, but I think it sort of draws from the same capacities of virtual reality that we wanted to use to sort of get people to experience things about history, not only history itself, but, you know, also sort of understand what happens when you take certain knowledge into consideration or certain information and leave other things out that you have to turn around because maybe the most important thing is behind you in the virtual space. And that kind of experience was what we wanted to recreate. We already used it, or I already used it in a seminar with students. And it actually really had that effect that they were really interested in the combination of nodes. So where does this information come from? Why does it belong to that cluster? So these kinds of questions we wanted to provoke. And what we presented in the video is a prototype, of course. So it's still lots of work to go into that project. But I hope that it helped you to kind of envision what we tried to do.
Very much for all the overviews. So I would first start with a general question to all of you. So you can decide who wants to speak first. So my first question is more a general question. So have your original ideas been implemented in your project? What barriers did you face, and were there any limits in your project? So who wants to talk at first?
Maybe I can just start. So yeah, the thing kind of looks like what I imagined it would look like. And also what I said about the interactivity and being able to sort of experience the perspective that you take when you construct knowledge graphs, that works really well. The biggest challenges we hit were, because this is a project that we did with computer scientists at our university. So one of the challenges was to synchronize our research interest with the computer science research interest, and try to make it interesting and, innovative for both parties. That was kind of tricky. Also designing the database and the ontology for the way that the knowledge is represented. That took us much longer than we thought it would take us, because there was a big discussion among us historians. As you can imagine, what is important information about the 100 Years' War? What do you leave out? How do you reduce the information that you have to actually make this knowledge graph readable? So that was sort of a big discussion, and painful decisions had to be made. So that was sort of one kind of limitation or bigger challenge that we had while creating this. And then unfortunately, the place where we didn't get to, and because the project, so the money for this project is running out at the end of the year, and we actually wanted to also have an interface where you can input your own data sets. So if you work on, I don't know, whatever historical research you have, maybe data about the Wewelsburg or Corvey, and you can sort of input the information into our tool and then use that as sort of your own kind of knowledge graph, or also compare it to the knowledge graphs that we have in our database. And we didn't quite get there because it took so much time to make all the other decisions. But in the end, I'm quite happy, impressed by what the people did do and achieve. So it still looks the way that I wanted it to look. So that kind of feels good also.
Thank you. Maybe Mareike and Erik? Yeah?
Yeah, of course. I don't know if it looked like if we imagined it at the beginning, because I think I had no really... We have this model in our exhibition, and it was so abstract, and so it was so interesting to see this, to start this castle to grow online, kind of. So it was very interesting to see what the company did with all the stuff we gave to them. It was so interesting to watch it grow, kind of, and see the medieval castle again. Of course, we had, Erik also said that before, we had some barriers, especially because Wewelsburg Castle changed so much during the time. So we had kind of a problem with our sources and with the opportunities we could use. So this was quite difficult, especially for you in the exhibition, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the barrier was that there were nearly no limits, because you can reconstruct nearly everything. You can reconstruct Wewelsburg as Hogwarts, and you always have to. It was a challenge to filter out the evidences and to stop at a certain point and not to go over the top. That was one barrier, because the company we worked with, they were really professional, and of course they can provide any pictures, images, any constructions we wanted, and it was quite a challenge to stay on the ground and to get in the evidence-based construction. So the barrier was that we had to stop at a certain point, and and it was, for me, it was quite hard to find the right way to indicate in the model, like by graphic tools or by special methods, where is the border between evidence and the border between evidence and my imagination. So we try to give in these transparent patterns to indicate what we suppose it could have looked like and what we know it looked like. So that was a challenge, of course.
Thank you. Julian and Ralf, your challenges and barriers?
Yeah, so the limits is very exciting because there are really not too many limits, and that makes it a little bit problematic, as you told. But this is a big challenge because you can play with content a little bit, and you can work on add-ons like we want maybe thinking about a rally through the archaeological park. So there are a lot of ways how to deal with new media or with a new technology to make the content, the medieval alive again. But we had some problems as well. For example, as an archaeologist, you're looking for the ground sources, something excavated. So it's pretty difficult to reconstruct the buildings over the ground. So how is the church looking? How is the house looking? How is the bridge looking? And that was the thing, part of the project. You have really to take contact to another scientists and take your information out of the ground sources or the ground runner. For example, the search. The search was a little bit more easy because you have a lot of data, but for example, how is the tower? Yeah. How is the angle of the roof? Something like this. This is you can only do when we with compare with other buildings or something like this. So that is the part of the project what was the most problematic, I would say.
Yeah, it was like we had to just watch examples, all historically accurate examples, like the church in Mahytka, which is, for example, built out of sandstone, and we decided that probably the church at Corvey would also be built out of sandstone since it was nearby obtainable and installing. And on the technical side, we can always push further and further, but we need to do the application as accessible as it gets for a broader audience. So we can't do an only high-end application. So we also have to tune down a little bit the details when programming the augmented reality models and implementing them into the mobile device application.
I've got the second question, so before I will open this, right? So we have, on the one hand, we have a project that carries the name of a famous time machine. So Silke, this is maybe also mainly addresses to you. And on the other hand, we have also words in the presentation like bring back to life, or showing the past. So to show the visitors how it could look like in the past, and all the other words like to being like in the past and real. So why do you use this metaphor? Do you think it is a time machine? Is ETARDIS a time machine? And what does this say about your project?
Do you want me to start again? So there is a funny story about the name, but of course it does make sense because if you know Doctor Who, so ETARDIS is the spaceship of Doctor Who, famous BBC series running like forever. It's this tiny blue police telephone box, and if you step in, the whole world kind of opens up. So it looks small on the outside, then you go in, and then you have the spaceship, and then with the spaceship you can travel through time and space. So it's not exactly a time machine, but this sort of idea of stepping into an office space, which is what you see first when you step into our virtual reality application, and then use that to be teleported into a space is also a difficult word. So into a surrounding that kind of looks like outer space or the Weltraum kind of space. But that sort of helps you to understand the temporal and spatial relations of the data points. And that's why we used kind of that, maybe it's an analogy to the ETARDIS. The funny story behind the name is that the computer scientist who I wanted to really have on board to design this said, I will do it, but only if we find an acronym that spells out TARDIS, because he was a big fan of Doctor Who. So that's the actual story, but I think sort of the metaphor still works for what we tried to do. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, interesting. Also want to?
So I think the big advantage of that model which we created is that it is embedded in a museum. So it's not a time machine, and we don't want to create an experience at first, but we kind of, it sounds a bit dry, but we kind of want to educate in a way as well, and we want to bring medieval or the limits of our knowledge as well to the museum, people coming to our museum. So it's not of course not a time machine. So we can embed it in a bigger context in our museum educational context.
I think we also so we get like similar projects from Wewelsburg and in Höxter, but in this way I think it's very different, because in Höxter we also got a little soldier inside and a horse and so many details, and maybe you can explain us why you're choosing like this, because I think you don't really know if there stands a soldier or if exactly there stands a horse, or so why you decide on this like this, or not just showing like shadows, what could it look like, why are you doing like this?
Yeah, the goal overall was to go beyond the simple visualization. If you just want to do a simple visualization, we can just print a big poster and put it there. The idea was to have an immersive world, and an immersive world who is open for a broader audience. So we decided to use a mobile software what is compatible with a mobile application, just our cell phones, and then bring it to life. So the object, when you open it, you can interact with it. You can walk through the object, you can walk through the doors, you can go with your mobile device closer to the walls, you can see the details there. And one part was also a little bit of entertainment, of course. So as we have been modeling the Hellwig, where the cart with the horses, we decided, well, this is quite a big, really huge AR model. It's more or less 100 meters long and maybe 20 meters broad. And it looks a bit lost. So we decided we put a card in there and we will animate it and we will make it walking. So the user is also motivated to actually walk on this historic street and go closer, take pictures, watch closer, and has a sense of immersion also there. And the same we did with the fortification. So we decided to say, well, we don't just want to put in the wall with the palisades. We will do a soldier with also story accurate armor, but it was apparently it is a little bit more a richer soldier. He has iron armor, and we will make it animated so the people has some sort of eye candy also there. So just to increase an entertainment factor and to increase the immersion experience there.
Maybe there's also some topics combined with the detailed views. For example, the chart on the street. As archaeological evidence, we have a lot of lines printed in the street and the plaster by the carts which driven there 800 years ago. So it's a lot of. Can you hear me? A lot of So you can have the other aspect that shows that the street was for sure a big trading part of the big trading line. So it's some historical context even. Yeah.
Thank you. So I would open up the decision for everybody, but you can also ask each other questions if you're interested into the other project. So feel free. Do you got questions here in present? At first, Klaus.
Okay. But thank you very much, not only for your video presentations, but also for the inputs you gave here already. I was wondering when I was, especially when I was comparing the two videos you presented from the Wewelsburg and Höxter, you made some fundamentally different choices, actually, if I understood you correctly. Because for the Wewelsburg, you decided to stick strictly to what you could prove on the ground material in the specific context. So there was one building you did decide not to include in the representation because you were not entirely sure how it would look like and where the place would actually have been. Whereas I was struck by the choice for Höxter, where you explained that, well, actually we took a building from the region which was not really there at Höxter, but it kind of represents the architecture that's typical, etc. So I was just wondering what you think in order to get you as specialists into discussions, into the discussion, what you think and how you feel about your mutual approaches. I mean, the aims are obviously and the settings are obviously entirely different. So each way to go has its own justification in a certain way. But I was wondering what you thought about yourselves mutually when you watched your presentations, if that's not too inquisitive.
I would start. I think it's form follows function. So you have to look, what is your aim, and in which context you will use this model. So the Landesgartenschau in Höxter is a completely different surrounding and aim that we have in the museum. So the function is completely different, and it depends on the evidence you have. So if you have, like in Höxter, a pretty good archaeological survey, you can, for example, like the Hellweg, you can say the charts, the carriages have had a special size, for example. So that's not what we could tell in Wewelsburg. So I was very impressed by the models or the virtual reconstruction in the Höxter, were presented in Höxter. But I wanted to bring one thing in the discussion, because every time we reconstruct and we build images, we put images into the heads of our consumers. So this is, I think, quite a responsibility we have, not to keep in mind, because these images in the Wewelsburg, for example, it will probably last for the next 20 years. The model will be displayed in our museum. and maybe it's the same in Höxter and in other places. So we have to keep in mind that that we put pictures in the heads of our consumers for the next 20 years, and research will go on, and the possibilities will change over the years. So that's what we all must keep in mind, I guess.
What do you think, Julian and Ralf?
I think I agree, or we agree on this. Our goal was it, of course, not to create, let's say, like a fantastic magic word or something, and this is why we used as most proven data as we could obtain and most evidence data as we could obtain. And well, from time to time, you sometimes have to do, let's say, an evaluated guess. But it's not like creating, or what we did is not creating like a game or a movie park, theme park style thing. So, and I think this is pretty important. There's no dragon flying around and breathing fire or something like that.
Son, you also got the question.
Yes, thank you. I enjoyed all your presentations and your projects. I think they are very impressive. And I actually want to continue thinking about the line that you just put into the discussion, namely the durability of these kind of models. So we're making things, making beautiful images using the knowledge we have now, and I think that's very valuable because we are creating new knowledge. For example, the BIM model you were talking about, it also gives us new knowledge about buildings that we can use as scientists. But how can we make sure that in 5 years or in 10 years we still can get to that knowledge? So the durability, how do we make sure that the things we create now are still useful when technical opportunities change, develop, become the things we do now become old-fashioned tomorrow. Things are going so fast. So I was wondering if you have taken that up in your projects or have ideas about that.
I have a very small addition to that, and that is, could the people on Zoom, if you start talking, just let us know if you could hear that well, because Sun is all the way in the back. So if not, then maybe we have to make some changes. But.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so we kind of didn't have that in mind, to be honest, when we started with this product. Because it was at the first it was so new and so interesting for us. We didn't thought about the future at first, and then we thought, well, it's a problem. We have it in a special exhibition, and then we have it in our exhibition, which is always there. So there's a lot of stuff missing out, and so we decided to add some information points. They are not in the model you've seen, so we're still working on them. So then you have information points, and you can have take a look. And another part, to be honest, museums are changing sometimes quite slowly, and so, as Erik said, probably this model will be there for the next 15 years, and it will work the way it works. And then, so we just kind of pushed the question a little bit away, to be honest, and thought maybe we have to think about that when it's when the museum gets a new design, and we have to really think about the question what to do with it then and what changed until this time. Yeah.
Maybe I
agree.
Okay, I'm just interested because I'm interested in museums. Like, do you have a digital strategy for your house, for your whole house? Because I think it's also combined here in this way.
In a way, yes. So we have a big, we have a project at the moment to get the inventarization program in a new program, which will add not only the objects in our magazines and museum, but also the archival stuff we have. So this is part of a digital strategy, if you want like but and we have some additional digital things like 360 degrees round ways to our museum. But we are still a museum, and we don't want to get too digital, because our aim or our goal is still to be the authentic place where objects are. That's one point. But
yes, another point of, I think, we are not only a historical museum, but we also have this memorial part about the time of the National Socialism and the concentration camp, and so maybe we are kind of afraid to be too detailed and to be too bubbly and do kind of a nice, funny little medieval model with some horses and some knights and all that stuff, because we are always afraid to create something that wasn't there, because it's such a huge part of this memorial debate. It's kind of a completely different thing. But we are also part of the district of Paderborn, so we are not
an island.
Yeah, kind of. We are part of the Kreis Paderborn, so part of all the structure they are having. And so we are digitalizing many stuff of this way, but not our museum stuff. So yeah, whatever stuff.
Silke wanted to say something. Yeah, who wants to? Silke. Silke. Yeah, Silke, please.
I just wanted to say something about sort of the longevity of the whole digital projects from a very different perspective, because as I said, the way that we funded what we did with the virtual reality application is a project funding. So funding runs out, what do you do then? How do you keep it running? How do you keep it maintained? Where does the whole thing basically go? So of course, there's always, like at universities, strategies in place to try to keep it accessible. Most funding agencies ask you for keep it accessible for 10 years. And of course, at least for 10, but it should be there longer. And we really had also a hard time deciding what kind of technical solution we can offer to actually keep this running in the ever-changing technological environment that you were pointing out. So it's sort of a debate on sort of long time archiving of these kinds of projects. And I think there's no out-of-the-box solution yet. So that's sort of an open problem. And maybe the second part is about, what about the things that we know today? Do we still kind of know them tomorrow, or do we have to change them? This is something that we really tried to address with the knowledge graphs. So you can manipulate that. You can input new knowledge and you can see what happens to these knowledge graphs. So part of the interaction that we are aiming for is precisely addressing the question, what do we know about something like the 100 Years' War? And how does that change if I input different information? So we kind of turned that into one of the research questions. That is kind of the second part of that question, I think.
Can I ask you, Silke, is it possible to build your own knowledge graph and that everybody else can also jump into it? So you can create knowledge and share it with others?
In theory, yes. But kind of the practical implementation on the technological side is sort of opens up the problem of how do you share knowledge? What kinds of rights do the users have? If you want to create something like you described, you need to have user accounts where you can save things and then you can share. So it's a big kind of back end necessary of user administration. And we don't really have that in place yet. So what you can do at the moment within the prototype is to save your settings, take them out, give them to someone else, and then they can sort of upload that when they enter the eTarget. So it's a little bit more complicated because there's no real user administration in place. But we tried to really think about the way that we need to document the construction of knowledge graphs and give the users the possibility to share what they constructed, how they, what their journey was, So you can basically talk to yourself and record your own memo while you walk through the knowledge graph, for example. There's also a sort of a log file that you can then download that shows you, okay, you went from, I don't know, Philip the Good to some other node and then some other and then some other, to sort of track the way that you went through that that knowledge. But at the moment, you kind of have to download it and then give it to someone, and then they can sort of redo it or upload it again. But that's just due to the technological, or to the sort of the problems we had with user administration so far.
Maybe we can come back to the question of Sun and ask in Höxter, how is the strategy for the future? So what you're doing with your project in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah. So most important is that we have to divide software and hardware. Hardware is the computational power will always be increasing, and the software is the thing what is written down. So in an ideal world, we can always say, okay, we will code and patch, and this patch will make the software compatible with the new hardware. However, since we are a company, we won't do it for free. But the overall plan is that the idea is to create a software what is a non-disposable product. For us, it was important to have the sustainability aspect in there, to say this software is accessible for a variety of older mobile devices and will be accessible for the next, let's say, 5 to 10 generations of smartphones. However, we can't go to Android or to Mac and tell them, hey, you need to code your next operating system in this way or that way. Thus, our software will be compatible with it. So there will be one point where the acceleration of the hardware and newer OS will be hindering the software to run, and then it would be important to do a patch, to write a patch, and to upload it to the App Store, and then the software will run as new.
Close. Yeah.
If I may, I would very much like to dig a little deeper there on this side, because we asked the question of sustainability, durability of the applications, and I mean, on the software side, you would still have to make another distinction with the running software on the one hand and the research data on the other. So the question I would like to ask is, what do you do with the research data behind the reconstructions? Do you foresee to publish them in an open format so that other users might have access to them? I imagine that, Silke, with your project, this was, well, basically you're already drawing on open access research data when you use the wiki database. But how does that look like in Höxter and Wewelsburg? So is there this kind of interoperability and accessibility foreseen, or do you keep that proprietary?
Julian, can't hear you. Are you speaking? I don't know. Sorry. You want to answer? Maybe
we can start. Yeah. Yes, as I already said, we have these information points in the model, so you have the possibility to see why we decided to do the way we did. On the other hand, we had the special exhibition. It was the Wewelsburg itself, 900 years of its existence, or the first mentioning of it. The existence is another part, sorry. the first mentioning of Wewelsburg Castle, actually, it is not the existence. So a lot of stuff we, Erik and Daniel, had to look on and did research about are also already published there. in a few years we have a new exhibition in our museum, so I think the medieval part will get more space. So today it's one room in our exhibition. We have 29, and one room is about the medieval time. So I think there will be much more space for the medieval part, and so this is kind of a way we try to conserve the information we collected with this project.
Okay. Yeah, Julian or Ralf?
Yeah. So what we did is just collecting knowledge and visualizing it. So actually, everybody can download now the product, so also you. And however, we have no, let's say, like plan for it, or we didn't wrote a paper where we collected all the knowledge we used. And this is something we didn't do, since our goal was to create a software and to upload it into an app store so it's accessible for a wide array of audience. But it's an interesting question.
Yeah, well, you still have access to all the parts. You can use the app, so it's public. And yeah, maybe some part. I was starting working in Höxter with the beginning of the building works at the LGS, Landesgartenschau. And there will be, I think, a small paper. We are writing about how we are working there, how was archaeological work. And I think some part will be the reconstruction. But the data of all the new excavation has to be collected. And maybe next year, I'm thinking about to write a small publication about the Landesgartenschau, part of the Landesgartenschau, the archaeological background, and the new access way or access with the digital records, digital reconstructions.
Thank you. Christian.
Yes, I have two questions, or perhaps it's only one, I don't know. It's all about knowledge about the Middle Age, or the representation of knowledge about the Middle Age in your project. And the first question is, do your projects produce new knowledge through their medial form, or is it just a new form of the old, like the wooden model, for a modern way of imagination, the past? Is this really a new form, and is there new knowledge? And the second question is, and could you gain new knowledge only in this way, by using this form, by using this medial form?
It's a very interesting question. It is new in some parts. Of course, we knew a lot of things before, and the archaeological excavations in the 1980s. Of course, we knew them, and we already had an analog model, wooden model. But in creating this digital visualization, it widened our view, because we had to, for example, as I first came to see our analog model, I thought, yeah, okay, so that's the tower within the Renaissance castle, and that's it. But to get an idea of how this tower maybe looked like, we had to get deeper in it, and we had to research, for example, the measurements of the walls. And then when you dismantle the whole Renaissance stuff around the medieval castle, you start to see that this tower house looks like a small hut, because it's not a tower actually, it's only a cube. And then you have to think about, okay, but we know how tower houses looked like in medieval times, in the 15th century, for example, and then you have similar examples in the region, and then you get to the point that it must have been taller. For example, that's one thing. And the second thing, actually, I already forgot. Can you?
Yeah, the second question was: could you gain new knowledge only in this way, by using the media form?
There's one, not always, but in one special point, it was exactly that, like this, because we always thought about the main gateway that led to the castle. The medieval castle is the actual nowadays gateway as well. And when we had one of our famous 5-hour Zoom meetings with a company, we looked on a very high resolution picture of which they took from the eastern facade, and then they could provide us with cuts through the Grundrisse, what is it called in English again, floor plans, and then we realized that there was a gateway which was walled after a while, and we couldn't really see that before because we hadn't the perspective on that, and that's, for example, one point where the new possibilities, technical possibilities, lead us to new insights.
So as a visitor in the museum for whom we created it, it's the only possibility to see that. There are two Gräben.
Trenches.
Yeah,
Thanks. Trenches. You can't see them until today, so they are actually lost, of course, in the today's small village. So even many people living in Wewelsburg were very fascinated and came and said, "It's so cool. I didn't know of living exactly on this trench. It's so interesting." So as a visitor, it is the only way to get this new information, or this new knowledge.
Silke, you also want to answer?
Maybe just quickly, I mean, by using the information present in Wikidata, of course, that what we do is not representing new knowledge, but I think what we try to do is to help people understand how these knowledge graphs are dependent on what you choose to include. So it's maybe not new knowledge about the Middle Ages, but new knowledge about creating knowledge, or about, where does that knowledge come from and how is it structured? And the second question, I think there are other ways to do it, but also from the feedback that we got in our usability studies, I think that the fact that you can actively take part in realizing the fact that, your perspective is actually the guiding structure of what kind of knowledge you see and how you construct it, is something that the VR can offer that other ways cannot. So I can, give a seminar on that and talk about knowledge graphs and have it in 2 dimensions on the screen or wherever. But I think that sort of the interactive possibilities that VR offers really sort of adds that 3rd dimension to this realization process.
Julian and Ralf?
Yes. Well, we think that from some point of view, we actually did create a little bit of new information, of new knowledge. For example, with the church, we only have the ground radar data and some data from the excavation. However, we reconstructed out of this data the whole building and put it in a 1-to-1 scale. Thus, the model is now experienceable, and you can see how it may look like and also the impact on the surrounding environment it may have. So I think to highlight is that this model is quite big, and with the one scale dimension, it's highlightable how important actually this small city at Corvey was in the Middle Age. Also, we've been programming the machine learning algorithm for image and object recognition, and there's something I would say we learned a lot about this, how to train the machine learning algorithm specifically for this, I'd say, more ecological use, which leads to the next questions. Is this maybe a future tool for categorizing objects like ceramic shards or something like this, which I think will never replace and train archaeologists, but may be really supportive when having big findings or a lot of objects who would need to be categorized.
This sounds like a really good, interesting possibility.
Yeah.
Okay, we get another question from the audience. Katja?
Yeah, I have a related question to Christian. I think because I asked myself if the models of knowledge are modeled by the models of virtuality.
Cool.
So thinking about what you said about there are no limitations, but at the same time we have lots of limitations because we have the limitations of the technology. And I ask myself if there are perhaps preferred forms of knowledge or of data, if we would like to speak from data, which become vivid through virtuality. So if there is a focus on special forms of knowledge and how is knowledge modeled by virtuality?
Keep thinking. I think it's a big question.
I think it's a really interesting question because we see two different types of recreation. I mean, obviously, all recreations are different, but Silke's way of presenting knowledge is very different to the kind of quite literal recreations of these medieval environments. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say about it, but it's you're basically dealing with the same type of knowledge or the same type of ideas about the past, but it's a very different way of representing them. And I think in that sense, it kind of creates a different type of Middle Ages, if that's correct. I didn't have a question, I just wanted to say.
Okay.
Maybe I may add. Sorry, I just heard myself talking, but now it's fine. Sorry. It's a great question, and I think you can see us all ponder that particular question. But I think that for our project, in a way, it is obvious that sort of the model of virtuality, or at least what we think is possible in virtual reality, obviously influenced the way that we designed the application. So we had a big discussion when we started the project of what is the specificity that the virtual reality surrounding actually adds to the way that we want to interact with these knowledge graphs. And all the tools that the application offers for that interaction are very much framed by that virtual reality environment or by the idea of virtuality. So on that part, I think it is true what you said, that sort of the way that we deal with these knowledge graphs or the knowledge represented, of course, depends on our models of virtual, or at least the way that you can sort of use the environment. Second thing I wanted to say is it also depends on what you mean when you say virtuality. Like in the introduction of the conveners of the workshop, there were, there were different levels of virtuality. So is it also sort of the imagination of what we think the Middle Ages was like without the representation in any kind of VR environment? Is that also already virtuality? And then, of course, the way that I think about the Middle Ages is also sort of embedded in the way that the knowledge graphs are made. So there's this connection on a different level which depends on your understanding of what virtuality actually is. And we wanted to buy into a concept of virtuality that is very abstract. And this is why we didn't reconstruct a medieval environment or surrounding, but we decided to interact with data points to keep it virtual in a different sense. You kind of still have to work with your own imagination and reconstruct the narratives that you learned to actually be able to read these knowledge graphs. It's not a really sufficient answer, I think, but this is what I was thinking while I was trying to answer your question.
Thank you. So maybe I have also another question about also virtuality, but it's about interactivity. So you also talked about it and like being inside immersive space. So in what kind of in which way does interactivity influence also your project? So how interactive is your project actual? Maybe also in the exhibition, in which area is this defined, and what kind of objects are there, and are the visitors able to do anything like physically? How influences this?
So the model is right now in the only room in exhibition which is about the Middle Ages, and we have there were archaeological excavations and the stuff which is also interesting for people who have no idea or have not such a huge knowledge about archaeology is displayed there. So you can find this model there. You can navigate on your own. So we just took some screenshots for you, but you can navigate on your own. You can click on this information point and take a closer look. Just zoom around and have a look at all this different buildings we created there, or not we, but the company.
But there's so as Mareike told you, already said. The medieval model is only one part of a bigger project, so it will get more interactive when you get to the modern times. For example, this Falco round flies around. We have how should I say in English, Maskottchen. We have a special animal, a falcon. Which lives at the castle as a real animal, and then we have a walking act costume. It's called Falco, and this Falco also is part of a guide for the children coming to our museum to go to special children's area or children's level, as we call it. And Falco will there will be a VR environment where Falco will fly through the castle and has a task to find find a thief.
Yeah, but in general, yes, he will talk about the medieval castle. Yeah. But that's not the point. But we also have that's a part we didn't mention in our video because it kind of didn't fit our idea. But we have 23 objects through different times, which also you can have a look on an iPad, which is in the exhibition. So there's much more about this project Digitale Bibelsburg than just this model. So it's kind of huge and will have next year. Many different aspects which you can navigate on your own and have a closer look on your own and decide what is interesting for you or what isn't interesting for you.
Thank you. Julian, Ralf?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think our augmented reality is pretty interactive because you can walk around the buildings, you can go inside, you can walk to the top, you can look to the top, to the left, to the side, to the ground and see a lot of interesting details. For example, it was a really nice experience. By the Landesgartenschau, we have the possibility to excavate a real basement from the 13th century from the city as something like a live excavation. And yeah, I told you already the problem we have with archaeology. We only can research the things under the ground, under the bottom. And for the basement, for example, something like half basement. Some part of the stones are outside of the medieval times. And if I excavated there, I explained to people how the basement looks like a little bit. We have the walls, we have the entrance area and so on. And when I say the basement was not 100% on the ground, but maybe 80 or 1 meter, 80 centimeter, 1 meter over the top in real, you can go to the reconstruction of the mid-age house, and you can see, you can go behind the house where the basement, it's behind the houses, on the end of the house. You can see it even at the model. You can see the, okay, you can, maybe you can't see it in this model, but you can see in the digital reconstruction how the basement looks like, and this is pretty close to the, yeah, I think the reality. The mid-age time. And another point which is very interactive is our excavation place. We make it like this, that we have a sandbox, and inside the sandbox you have some archaeological objects like a well, like a street, and like a corner of a basement we reconstructed. And inside this excavation place, you can find the objects. And you really, I told it already, you can really take these objects from a 3D print, and then you can research it. So you can, you can act like an archaeologist. Okay, it's a little bit more easy. We don't only take sand away, but you can find real objects like a key. And then you can research it. Pretty interactive. So I like it very much. And another ask, what can we do next, maybe? Or what is in 5 years or 10 years? So from the technical side, I can't say it, but I think it will go on. But for the contents, we have a lot of ideas which we can do in the archaeological park, which still remains after the Landesgartenschau, and the people still can go there. They only need the application, and I'm thinking about maybe have a rally, and maybe you can show something about excavation methods, what kind of tools you would take, what kind of measurement or something like this. So the contents can be added on, I think, and this is the point. I like it pretty much when I'm working with Nusek together. I ask, is it possible? They say yes. Something like this. So this is part of the not too many limits, maybe. Yeah.
For example, I don't know if you have noticed this, but Meta has put out a new Quest 3, which is a mixed reality glass, more or less. And this is would be really interesting to use this in terms of an application where you go the next step from augmented reality into a mixed reality, where you have an augmented digital world combined with the real world, and now you take the next step into a full interaction within digital models there, which are manipulated by the user in real time. So this would be the next step to go into mixed reality. We have some mixed reality stuff in there, but not 100%. And virtual reality is also a pretty interesting point. I would want to point that out there. However, we as a company, we also use virtual reality because we like the flexibility there. So as you mentioned, I work in the environment of nuclear power plants and decommissioning. And for us, the virtual reality is a training tool for our specialists or for our workers to train them in a really safe manner, to sensibilize them for work safety and radiological safety without putting them into real danger.
We're really excited. Yeah, we'll see. We got 2 questions before I will close our panel. So, Christina, you also? Okay. Yeah, Christina. Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Silke Schwandt a question, and it connects to the question how knowledge is modeled and changed by the virtual. And when you think about the representation of knowledge in virtual reality, you often come across projects modeling it with regard to natural phenomena like rooms or weather, you think of clouds, or space, as in your project. But when you talked about it at the beginning of our section, you tried to avoid the word space, rather speaking of surrounding. So I sort of approached the question from the other side, and I was wondering if mostly the body is a reference point of visualization and of how to manipulate virtual reality. Isn't that a way of influencing or modeling knowledge as well? Because computers, of course, can think in more than 4 dimensions, but we are not really up to that. So, is there some projects that try to keep the body out of the virtual to make new narrations possible?
I don't know whether there are any projects who try to keep the body out of the virtual reality, because I think that having it in is one of the big possibilities to really, to work on the whole, to think about the embodiment and the interactivity, and people can move and all these kinds of things. So we had lots of testing also for motion sickness. Do we want to give them the feeling that they actually move? We decided that they can teleport because that's easier for most people to understand, because they still stand. I don't know how often you were inside virtual reality applications. It can actually be really weird and do funny things to your body. So I don't know about any projects. I mean, what we tried to do with the way that we created the space, and I avoided space because it's a theoretically really difficult term. So I tried to not overuse the term too much, which is why I kind of try to talk about environments and surroundings. But of course, it is, you put a body in space and then you need to design that space. So that was one of the tasks that we had to do. And in our first version of the prototype, the surrounding was just gray. It was there was no feeling for any kind of spatial relation. And that was also weird. So for people that try to experience or that sort of moved around in our application. And then we went for this outer space kind of feeling that is something in between giving you the feeling of being somewhere and not in nothingness, while not giving you too much of a set surrounding that sort of guides your imagination too much. You start in this office space and then you go somewhere where anything is possible, which is why the surrounding is basically designed as outer space. So my answer would be, first, I don't know about any projects that try to do that, and I would find it really difficult to use virtual reality applications and not use the bodily experience, because I would argue that this is one of the surpluses of using a virtual reality application. It's not a really good answer, but I would, be really interested. Maybe we should search for people who try to not use that bodily experience. Okay,
thank you. So that.
Yeah, we don't have that much time anymore, and this is not necessarily a very closing question. We're quite open, so we'll see. But actually combining the two things, so the idea of this virtual Middle Ages and the interactivity that is built in your models, or these embodiments as well. I'm wondering whether you consider a model that has a high interactivity for your audience. So either some of you are dealing with school children, or people who are coming to a museum, or historians, professionals. This interactivity, or this doing something with your body rather than, obviously looking at something is also with your body, but you know what I mean. Whether that changes our imagination of the Middle Ages, this virtual Middle Ages, so this imaginary. As I said, not a small question.
I think it changes a lot. So this is one of the reasons why we decided it shouldn't be too interactive and to play around, because of course there are a lot of school people coming to this, especially this museum, and a lot of people who have not studied history and are not that fond of all this basic knowledge. But we decided that we didn't want something when you can feel like you are part of it and you are in the medieval again and you can see the castle. So I think it plays a huge role how much interactivity there is and how much you then have the illusion you are part of it, and you're living right now with a VR application, and you can see the coaches passing by and there are knights riding next to you. Then you have the feeling you're part of it, and of course then you have an imagination of how it was back in time, and this is what we exactly didn't want to, and so we decided to use not that much interactivity, or just possible, just click and zoom around.
Yeah. Julian, Ralf?
Yes. So for us, it was actually important to create a lot of interactivity, I would say, because our audience would not be a scientific-driven audience, what is looking for, let's say, expand their knowledge. It's more like an audience what has maybe no connection to archaeology or to history. So we decided to make it playful, to have a gamification factor inside there. And the goal was overall to excite the user and to create interest into the field of archaeology.
Very much. At first, thank you for participating also via Zoom. Please stay here, so you can also be part of the next discussion. So we're starting our break right now. We will share just a picture of our plan from today in Zoom, so you know what happened next. And we see us in 15 minutes for the next discussion. So thank you very much, Silke. Thank you. Julian and Ralf. Thank you, Mareike and Erik.